The movie opens in a laboratory at Cambridge University, where a group of scientists is conducting experiments in search of a virus. So far, they haven't been able to fully detect or understand it. The lab also houses several chimpanzees, which are being used for testing. The scientists inject the virus into the chimps, hoping to observe its effects. However, the virus turns them aggressive and extremely violent. Meanwhile, a group of animal rights activists secretly infiltrates the lab. They're part of an underground organization dedicated to rescuing animals subjected to cruel experiments. The activists have learned that the chimpanzees are being tortured and illegally held in this facility, so they've come to set them free. As they begin unlocking the cages, one of the doctors rushes to stop them. "You have no idea what you're doing," he warns. "These chimps have been infected with a virus. If you go near them, they could be extremely dangerous." But the activists ignore him and open the cage anyway. The moment the door swings open, the enraged chimpanzees attack. One of them lunges at a woman in the group, biting her viciously. She stumbles back, frozen in shock. Within seconds, her eyes change color and she suddenly starts vomiting blood. As the blood from the infected woman splatters onto her fellow activists, they too become infected. The virus spreads instantly, turning them aggressive and uncontrollable. Unlike the chimpanzees, the virus affects humans even more severely due to the complexity of the human brain. It doesn't just cause extreme aggression, it drives people completely insane, eventually transforming them into mindless, rage-fueled zombies. The virus spreads through blood and saliva, making any contact deadly. The lab doctor, realizing the situation is spiraling out of control, tries to stop the infected woman before she can do any more harm. But overwhelmed by violent rage, she attacks and kills him instead. From there, the virus spreads at an alarming rate. At first, it engulfs the entire city, and before long, it takes over the whole country. 28 days later, a man named Jim is shown waking up in a London hospital. He has been in a coma for weeks, unaware of the chaos that has unfolded. As he regains consciousness and stabilizes himself, he realizes something is terribly wrong. The hospital is completely abandoned. Confused and disoriented, Jim stumbles through the empty hallways, calling out for anyone, but there's no response. Stepping outside, he finds the city eerily silent, with not a single soul in sight. The walls are covered in missing persons posters, a chilling sign of the catastrophe that took place while he was unconscious. Desperate for answers, he makes his way to a nearby church. But as he steps inside, he quickly realizes that the situation inside is even worse than outside. The church is filled with decaying corpses, bodies that have clearly been lying there for days. A wave of dread washes over him. He has no idea what's going on, but one thing is certain: the world he knew is gone. Meanwhile, a priest stumbles toward Jim, his mouth dripping with blood, making strange guttural sounds. Behind him, more infected begin moving in Jim's direction. Panic sets in as Jim realizes they're not normal people. They're something else, something dangerous. Terrified, Jim turns and runs. Just as the infected close in on him, two strangers suddenly appear and set the zombies on fire, killing them instantly. Jim barely escapes with his life. The two strangers take Jim to their hideout. Once they remove their masks, they introduce themselves. One is a young man named Mark, and the other is a woman named Selena. After catching his breath, Jim tells them his story. Before all of this, he was a bicycle courier. He got into an accident with a car, and after that, everything went blank. He only regained consciousness today and has no idea what's happening. Selena and Mark exchange a grim look before explaining the horrifying truth. A deadly virus has spread throughout the city, infecting almost everyone. The government and military failed to contain it. Everything collapsed. Jim is the only survivor they've come across in the past 6 days. They also revealed that neither of them has any surviving family. Jim, still holding on to hope, insists on searching for his own. The next day, they visit his house. Jim cautiously steps inside, his heart pounding. As he moves through the empty rooms, his worst fears come true. His parents are dead. They had taken their own lives. In his mother's hand, he finds a photograph of himself. He turns it over and reads the message written on the back. "Jim, we left you sleeping. Now we're sleeping with you. Don't wake up." His hands tremble as he reads the words. Tears well up in his eyes, and his body shakes with grief. The pain is unbearable, but deep down, he knows there's no changing what has already happened. His parents are gone, and he has no choice but to accept it. The three of them decide to stay at Jim's house for the night. They know it's too dangerous to head back in the dark since the infected are far more active after sunset. As night falls, they sit together trying to process everything. But suddenly, two zombies burst in, former neighbors of Jim, now completely transformed. A brutal fight breaks out. Jim, Selena, and Mark manage to kill them, but in the chaos, Mark gets bitten. Selena immediately realizes what this means. The infection spreads fast. There's no time to hesitate. Without a second thought, she kills Mark before he can turn, even though it clearly pains her to do so. Now, only she and Jim remain. Still shaken, they step outside and notice a distant building where a light is flickering. Someone else is out there. They're not alone. As they make their way toward the building, zombies spot them and start chasing. Jim and Selena race up the stairs, desperately trying to escape. Just as the infected close in, a man suddenly appears and pulls them to safety, slamming the door shut behind them. Their savior introduces himself as Frank. He's been hiding in the building with his daughter, Hannah, trying to survive. He offers them a place to stay, and they gratefully accept. Frank tells them about a military broadcast that was still playing a few days ago. The message claimed there was a cure for the virus and that survivors were being helped. The broadcast even provided a location where people could seek refuge. But Selena is skeptical. Why would they be rescuing people? She questions. This message was probably pre-recorded. Still, with no other real options, they decide to take the risk. The next day, they set out in Frank's car, heading toward the supposed safe zone. While driving, they come across a tunnel blocking their path. Jim looks at it warily. "That tunnel doesn't look safe," he warns. But Frank insists, "This route will get us there faster." They drive into the tunnel, weaving between the many abandoned cars scattered along the road. Frank speeds up, trying to get through as quickly as possible, but suddenly, the car's front tire blows out. They have no choice but to stop and change the wheel. As they scramble to fix it, they hear something terrifying: zombies. A horde of them is closing in fast. With no time to waste, they frantically replace the tire. Just as the infected reach them, they jump back in and speed off, barely escaping with their lives. After 2 or 3 grueling days on the road, they finally arrive at the location mentioned in the broadcast. But to their horror, it's completely deserted. There's no one there. Seeing this, Selena shakes her head. "I knew this was a mistake. We should turn back." Disappointed and exhausted, they begin to lose hope. But just as they're about to leave, Frank notices a crow picking at a rotting corpse nearby. Frustrated, he shouts at the bird to shoo it away. In that moment, a single drop of blood from the corpse falls into Frank's eye. He freezes. His body tenses. Within seconds, the infection takes hold. Realizing what's happening, his daughter, Hannah, rushes toward him, but Frank instinctively shoves her away as his mind succumbs to the virus. Jim knows what has to be done. He raises his weapon, ready to put Frank out of his misery before he fully turns. But before he can pull the trigger, a gunshot rings out. Frank is shot dead by a soldier. A group of soldiers appears, taking Jim, Selena, and Hannah into their vehicle. They are brought to a heavily fortified compound where they meet Major Henry, the leader of the group. He reassures them that they're finally safe. The military has built strong barricades to keep the infected out. If any zombies get too close, an alarm system will go off, and the soldiers will eliminate them immediately. But there's a catch. They still don't have a cure for the virus. Later, Major Henry takes Jim to meet Sergeant Mailer, a soldier who was infected days ago. Instead of killing him, they've chained him up inside the compound. For experimental purposes, the soldiers kept Mailer chained up to study him. Their goal was to see how long an infected person could survive without food and gather more information about the virus. That night, while everyone is having dinner, a loud explosion suddenly shakes the compound. The alarm blares. Zombies have breached the perimeter. The soldiers rush outside and begin shooting, taking down the infected as quickly as possible. When they return inside, one of the officers starts harassing Selena. Jim immediately steps in, ready to fight, but Major Henry stops him and orders him outside. That's when the horrifying truth is revealed. The military's broadcast was a lie. They weren't offering real shelter or safety. It was all a trap to lure in survivors, especially women, to use them however they pleased. Jim is horrified. He grabs Selena and Hannah, determined to escape, but before they can make it out, Major Henry calls his men, blocking their path. Jim struggles, but is eventually knocked unconscious. There is, however, one soldier who disagrees with the others, Sergeant Farrell. He secretly tries to help Jim, Selena, and Hannah escape, but before they get far, the other soldiers capture them and lock them up. Inside the room, Farrell whispers to Jim, revealing something shocking. Major Henry has lost his mind. The virus hasn't spread past 100 miles. It can't cross water or mountains. The rest of the world is still out there, but Henry and his men don't care. They want to create their own twisted little world here. The next day, Jim and Farrell are dragged into the woods to be executed. The soldiers shoot Farrell, killing him instantly, but Jim manages to escape into the trees, running for his life. Wounded and exhausted, Jim collapses. Lying on the ground, he looks up and sees something incredible, a fighter jet soaring across the sky. Farrell was right. The outside world still exists. People out there are still alive. Back at the compound, Selena and Hannah remain trapped. Jim knows he has to act fast. He comes up with a bold plan. He activates the alarm system near the camp. As the siren blares, zombies swarm the area. Major Henry and his soldiers scramble to fight them off. In the chaos, Jim picks off the remaining soldiers one by one. Realizing he's losing control, Henry tries to escape, but Jim isn't about to let him go so easily. He chases him back to the camp, ready for the final showdown. As chaos erupts in the compound, Jim makes a daring move. He frees Mailer, the infected soldier. Once loose, Mailer immediately goes on a rampage, attacking the other soldiers and spreading the infection even further. Panic breaks out. Everyone scrambles to save themselves. In the confusion, Hannah and Selena get separated. Selena is captured by one of the soldiers and shoved into a car. Just when things seem hopeless, Jim arrives and kills the officer instantly, saving her. But something about Jim's brutal attack unsettles Selena. For a moment, she hesitates. Is Jim infected? Has he turned into one of them? But before she can react, Hannah suddenly appears and hits Jim over the head. She thought he was attacking Selena. Realizing their mistake, the three of them quickly pile into a car, desperate to escape. But as soon as they open the door, they find Major Henry already inside, waiting for them. Raising his gun, Henry glares at Jim. "You killed all my men," he growls and pulls the trigger. Jim barely survives. Before Henry can fire again, Hannah slams the car into reverse, throwing him off balance. Suddenly, Mailer appears from behind. The infected soldier smashes through the car's rear window and drags Major Henry out, tearing him apart. With Henry gone, the three survivors make their escape. Selena quickly administers first aid to Jim, treating his gunshot wound. He drifts into unconsciousness. When he wakes up, he finds himself in a small countryside house. Selena and Hannah are right there with him. Then they hear it, the sound of a jet flying overhead. Rushing outside, they grab a large white cloth and spread it out, signaling to the pilot. As the plane circles above, hope returns. Rescue is finally here. The three survivors smile, realizing they've made it. And with that, the movie comes to an end.